Are you tired of watching German Schranz tutorials from which you can't understand a single word? In this video I prepared a powerful Schranz kick blueprint. We will use it to create these sounds. What's best is that you can create them with only Ableton stock effects and samples. The first and the most important step is the samples choice. A Schranz kick can consist of a punchy kick sample, a rumble kick for tail, hi-hat loops, and other percussive sounds. I picked more than one sample of each type to use a very powerful layering technique. It's a way of combining sounds that complement each other. A few samples played together give a far fuller sound than just a single one. The more diverse the samples, the more interesting results you achieve. A very important layering rule is to always have low frequencies coming from a single sound to ensure a tight, strong low end. If I layer 3 kick samples, 2 of them should have a high-pass filter attached to cut lowest frequencies. In the MIDI clip, I create a simple rhythm to play all the samples. To make the kick more interesting, you can transpose some of them. To keep the playback speed and rhythm of a sample, click the warp button. It keeps the sample length the same regardless of its pitch. To make it happen, Ableton has to forcibly alter the tone of the sound or glitch it. Pick a different warping algorithm to control this behavior. Another trick is to reverse some of the samples. As you could hear, this works well on rumble kick drums that are supposed to be our tail. To make the samples fit better, you can start off by changing their playback mode. With trigger mode, the whole sound will be played every time until the beginning of the next MIDI note. This might cause some samples to overlap unnecessarily. To prevent that, change the playback mode to gate. Now the sample duration is controlled by MIDI notes lengths. You can trim further the sounds into simpler. Adding fade-ins and fade-outs helps removing unpleasant clicks created by samples trim. Trimming the kick samples change a lot how they interact with each other. The last thing is to adjust the volume of each sample. For clarity reasons, I recommend using utility. This processing created a kick foundation. The second step is group processing applied on all the sounds. It's time to give the kick all the dirt and filth it deserves. I will start with heavy compression to glue everything. A multiband dynamics is a flexible tool that gives great control over the compression. It has 3 compressors inside processing different frequency ranges. The OTT preset is a good starting point for getting that intense sound. While compressing the mid and high frequencies gives an aggressive sound, compressing the low end makes the kick less powerful. Simply turn off the bottom compressor to omit low end processing. Now we have 2 compressors from which the top one processing high end is more aggressive than the middle one. This effect has lots of different parameters, but thankfully we don't have to adjust everything. Currently the compression is way too heavy. We can reduce the overall influence of this effect with the amount knob. The next thing is to tweak crossover filters. They adjust frequency ranges that go into each compressor. If you want to hear less bass, turn down the bottom filter cutoff. If you want to feel more high-end, turn up the top filter cutoff. I will adjust now these filters to bring mid frequencies up front. The multiband dynamics can compress the sound in two ways, but if we play the kick, we will see the volume levels are always inside of red rectangles. It means that only downward compression is applied, so we don't have to bother with the B section, which is for upwards compression. The downward compression amount is set in the A section with both threshold and ratio. Our goal is aggressive limiter-like compression. The ratio values are already high, so we can adjust threshold levels only. The lower the threshold, the bigger portion of the sound is compressed. The volume of the compressed frequency ranges can be tweaked later with output knobs. To fine-tune the compression, you can adjust its reaction times in the T section. For example, if you want to keep the attack and click from the hi-hats, increase the attack of the top compressor. Let's compare the kick with and without adjusted effects. The second crucial thing is distortion. This will crush the sound and give crunch, grit and texture. There are some proven ways of using distortion. If your kick needs an industrial feeling and a warm but distinct texture, use the amp effect. You can pair it with cabinet placed before. If you want to make the kick warmer and saturated, try overdrive or drum bass. For digital distortion and lots of crackle, use either saturator or redux. To bring more noise, use again redux or erosion. At first I will use the drum bass. It's best to start with choosing a right distortion type. The amount of distortion is dialed with the drive knob. Trim acts as an input volume fader, and with this you can apply a fixed compression to the kick. We already used the multiband dynamics, so there is no need for more compression. The crunch knob emphasizes mid-high frequencies, while damp can roll off some high ends. The right section is a resonant filter which you can use to generate new low frequencies. I won't use it because I will take care of the low end with another effect. Transient knob is a simple way to make the kick more punchy. The second effect is the overdrive. It distorts and emphasizes a frequency range chosen with a bandpass filter. It's an aggressive effect, and most of the times you want to use low dry wet values to blend it. After using the bandpass filter, you can set the amount of distortion with drive control. The tone knob adds more high end to the sound. The dynamics fader controls the dynamic range of the sound. Use it to fine-tune the overdrive behavior. At last I will use redux to muffle the sound and add a subtle noise. The redux is split in two sections, each of these add another kind of distortion. The jitter and shape knobs fine-tune the redux behavior. I use this effect subtly, so they are currently irrelevant. Let's compare the distorted kick drum with undistorted one. Distortion effects add lots of new frequencies, but not all of them are useful. To get rid of the resonances and to enhance the good parts of the kick, I will equalize it. Most of the times we will want to enhance the low end rumble. It sits in the area between 80 and 200 Hz. On the other hand, low mid frequencies from 200 to 600 Hz roughly make the kick bloated. It's good to cut them. To make the kick sound fuller, boosting the area from 600 to almost 2 kHz can be the solution. If you can hear the shh sound in the kick, so cut the 2K area instead of boosting it. To control the high end and make the kick sound muffled, you don't only have to use a low pass filter. A wide cut at 5 kHz is also beneficial and more transparent. The kick still sounds too noisy, which means we have to find and precisely cut more high-end resonances. With the help of frequency spectrum, I listen to each loud spike in the frequency spectrum and judge if it needs to be cut. You might have to do bold cuts, which includes using a notch filter to suppress ringing frequencies. The result is a second equalization curve. If you want to make the kick sound even better, we have to work now with individual sounds. For example, this kick could be more punchy. I will equalize the main kick sample. If I want to make it sound punchier and not deeper, I have to boost the area from 100 to 300 Hz. The kick needs more precise equalization, which I can't do in the group processing chain. Further resonances have to be cut from individual sounds. We can apply more distortion too. Here I have a hi-hat loop with another redux. It's adjusted in a similar way as the redux in the group processing chain, so we expect to add some noise again. This time though, I will use the DC shift feature. Thanks to extreme beat depth reducement, the amount of extra noise added is massive. This noise should be equalized as well. Do you remember my other distortion effects recommendations? Let's use these to create another kick sound. Our existing distortion chain will be replaced with a new one. I will start with an aggressive amp effect. As with overdrive, I will turn down the tri-wet control at first. Now I will pick a suitable amp type. The overall amount of distortion is set with the gain knob. The middle section, along with the presence knob, is meant to be an equalizer section. With certain distortion settings though, these might not work as expected. Treat these knobs rather as a way to fine-tune the distortion and adjust them up to your taste. To influence the texture created by amp, I will place the cabinet before it. As the name suggests, it simulates various guitar cabinets. It's wise to start again by decreasing the dry wet value. After that, pick a favorable combination of speaker, microphone placement and its type. Both cabinet and amp allow for stereo image enhancement with additional dual processing. Because distorted kick drums most of the times sound better when they are very narrow or in mono, I will keep these settings. We added a nice texture to the kick, but it needs more power and bass. The last effect will be the saturator, which I will use as a wave shaper distortion effect. To give it more influence over the sound, I will add some drive while reducing the output simultaneously. Now I can adjust the character of distortion, besides using predefined wave shaper curves. I can create my own ones. In the wave shaper mode, additional 6 faders are enabled. Each one changes the sound in a different way. The help box on the left bottom gives a decent description of them. From practical point of view, it's best to experiment and learn the sound of each control by tweaking them. An exemplary wave shaper curve can look like this. Wave shaper distortion is very sensitive to low frequencies. Once I enable the color section, I can decrease that sensitivity with the bass knob. These 3 remaining knobs are the same thing as the bandpass filter in the overdrive effect. While Ableton manual doesn't state it, I guess this filter is placed before distortion stage. I will use this filter to enhance the low end. In the end, fine-tune the dry-wet knob. At last, I will return to the drum rack and change the pitch of one of the samples. You really can rely on the simple kick structure. Swap the samples, experiment with distortion and create hundreds of different kick drums. Sometimes you will have to tweak the equalizers as well, so I recommend watching another tutorial of mine which covers equalization more deeply. In the end, let's compare both kick drums to see how big of a difference a change of distortion settings gives.